pilots exist in every country of the world, speaking hundreds of different native languages, and the one thing they all have to do is fly aircraft into airports, dodging all of the other planes around them. So how do they all know exactly what's going on all of the time? Are the air traffic controllers multilingual? Do they speak every language on the planet? What is the language of aviation?
We are expecting generally good weather conditions during the flight. For your safety, please ensure that you have your seatbelt fastened at all times, even if the seatbelt sign has been switched off.
You're up in the clouds and the pilot just spoke your language on the intercom. So obviously he's got this and absolutely nothing can go wrong.
LA departure frequency 123.9er.
Roger. Huh? Request vector. Over. What?
And you can always count on the flight attendants for clarity.
Function automatically when needed for your safety. If you see the mask, privilege mask towards your follow oxygen.
Holy cow, that's some bad English right there. If I would be a first-time flyer on that plane listening to that English safety demonstration, I'd be out of that plane within seconds.
Yeah, I wouldn't stay on that plane either. But don't pilots also use like hand gestures? Is that a thing?
In aviation, we cannot use gestures because in most cases, the parties involved cannot see each other. So for example, the pilots sit in the cockpit of the flying aircraft. On the other hand, they need to talk to the air traffic controllers who are sitting way miles away, thousands and hundreds of miles away in the air traffic control tower, and they cannot see each other, so they cannot use gestures. So we are only left with the next best thing, that is language.
So one standard language they can all understand, super important. I can't imagine what that language would be.
English is the standard language of aviation. It is used by all the personnel involved in this industry, by pilots, by cabin crew, by air traffic controllers, flight dispatchers, etc., etc.
So English is the universal pilot language, but what if you just want to fly around in your own country? Because some pilots do only fly domestically. Well, as long as you don't ever fly to other countries, then you don't have to learn English.
And in such cases, pilots of different countries speaking different languages, and then the ATC controller will be speaking his own language of that country. That will be really chaotic and a lot of confusion will happen.
So let's say a Russian colleague is performing a go-around ahead of me. Sooner or later, the ATC controller will ask what the reason was, and if he replies, "Сдвига ветра," how on earth am I supposed to know that meant wind shear?
Okay, so for air traffic controllers, it's a bit different. Stricter. Air traffic controllers must be able to speak English as well as their local language, no matter where they are located, unless there are no international flights at all, ever. So let's say a French pilot flies into Brazil. Does he also have to speak English? Won't someone just speak to him in French? No, the whole flight crew is expected to speak English, and when the pilot initiates a call in English, the controller immediately switches to giving information in English, whatever wonderful native Brazilian accent he may have. They're actually encouraged to practice a neutral English accent, by the way, neither British nor American. Also, it's not enough to have basic English skills. Pilots have to learn English to a pretty high level, as you're about to see. But I have to ask, why not another big language like Spanish or French? Well, this decision was made back in the 1950s. The year was 1944, and it was a time when air travel was becoming more common. Of course, air travel had its problems, so they held a convention in Chicago to come up with answers.
So in order to remove all the confusion and misunderstandings and miscommunications, we understood that we need one single language, a standardized language that is used universally and globally, accepted throughout the different countries, that is spoken in the aviation industry, right?
Nearly 1,000 people crammed into a hotel in Chicago, and 37 days later, signatures were signed, and suddenly we had the ICAO, the Convention on International Civil Aviation, also known as the Chicago Convention. Just about made through that tongue twister. To this day, they make all the rules of airspace, including the language that everyone has to speak.
This would bring the different people involved in aviation business, like pilots and ATC and cabin crew, on one single page, because they'll be now speaking one standard language, and that would extract a lot of misunderstandings and confusions from communication.
And another reason they chose English is the US and the UK were manufacturing most of the world's aircraft at the time. And remember that by the 1950s, English was already one of the most spoken languages in the world. But for pilots, was it English?
If you ask me how important English is in aviation on a scale from 0 to 10, My answer is 12.
You better believe it. But just because you're fluent in English doesn't mean you speak aviation English. See, up in the cockpit, it's a whole other story.
You turning around on the red eye?
I'm jumping puddles for the next few months, trying to earn my keep running leapfrogs for the weak and weary.
This is where it gets fun. See, pilots actually have their own secret language. Remember, they need to talk to air traffic controllers who are sitting miles away, and over a fuzzy radio, the guy flying the plane can't afford to make a mistake. He wants to stay alive just as much as you do. So after they get to the required level in their English ability, there are all sorts of other language skills to practice. In fact, you can be an expert level 6 native English speaking pilot and still be a substandard communicator in aviation English.
Keep the blue side up. That's not something that you're going to hear a lot of pilots say to each other while we're out flying around, but essentially what it means is I'm talking about the artificial horizon that you'll see in most cockpits. The sky is going to be blue and the land is going to be brown.
So how do trainees learn all of this pilot talk? I'm going to tell you all about that and even give you some real pilot phrases to try out, so stay tuned. And if you love this video and would like to see more of them, well, give us some love by clicking like and subscribe. And don't forget that bell as well so you get notified whenever we make new videos.
Because I was inverted.
Obviously, if you've inverted your Cessna or your plane that you're learning to fly on and you're completely upside down, that's going to be a bad situation.
Keep the blue side up. When you decide to become a pilot, you have to learn a lot of new words, kind of like learning a new language. Want to try out some pilot phrases? I know you do.
So you'll hear a pilot say, "Hey man, what are you flying?" "Oh, I'm on the 7-3. Or another example will be, "Yeah man, I fly the 7-4 for this airline."
So what is that all about? Well, he's talking about Boeings, the 737 or the 747 and so on. Boeing pilots drop the last 7 after the type of aircraft that they're flying because every Boeing plane ends with a 7. Unless they're flying the 777, of course.
"Yeah man, I fly the 777 for this airline."
Then there is the jump seat. If you're a pilot trying to get a seat to get home or to get to work, you can say, "I'm going to jump seat home," or "I'm going to jump seat to work."
Deadhead is when your airline is going to be moving you from one location to another location. And usually that's to operate a flight or to get you back to your base. So deadhead means that you, either by yourself or with your crew, will have a seat in the back. It's paid for by the airline. And basically what you're going to do is show up and check in like a normal passenger, and you're going to sit in the back. And that is a deadhead.
Legs. This is the number of flights you're doing in a day. A 2-leg day, a 5-leg day.
Turns or out and backs are what pilots and flight attendants refer to depending on the type of flying that they're doing. As an example, you're in Chicago, you're going to Denver, and then you're going back to Chicago. So when you're in Chicago, if you're talking to another crew member that you see on the jet bridge or walking by, they may ask, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they would say, "Oh, I'm doing a Denver turn." So by saying you're doing a Denver turn, you're leaving Chicago, going to Denver, and you're going to turn and come right back.
Here's a whole bunch more if you want to pause and check them out. I love these. It's like understanding a secret code. And speaking of code breaking, it's not too dissimilar to the way that we teach languages over here at StoryLearning. We teach languages through stories. The method is a little bit like a code. We give you a simple story in the language suitable for your level, and then you learn how to break that code, or in other words, uncover the code of the language. And by teaching this way, you learn the language in a very natural way, which is very fun and very different from all of that memorizing of grammar rules that you probably remember back in school. We call this method StoryLearning, and if you're interested in learning about how to learn a new language through stories, you should download my StoryLearning kit. It's completely free, shows you how to learn a new language with stories. Link in the description. Now back to the video.
Cessna 75600 at Romeo 8, requesting taxi for northwest departure with information Zulu.
So here are the phonetic alphabets that we use in aviation. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot.
Echo, Foxtrot, Golf, Hotel. Yeah, I know this. If this sounds familiar to you, it is the ICAO phonetic alphabet. And of course, the military also uses these words. If you're a pilot, you're going to learn this alphabet off by heart. They may sound like random words, but they're very much not.
You might notice that no two words sound any similar to any other word. And that's the benefit of this phonetic alphabets. Plus, any particular word you pick from these words, for example, let's say golf. Even if you were to pick the first half, that is gol, you still will be able to know that the ATC wants to transmit the letter G.
And we use this for things such as your call sign, pronouncing your call sign to the tower. The call sign is the name, basically, given to your aircraft. So let's say this is our aircraft. We're called Victor Hotel Mike Alpha Sierra.
If you were to have to read back this clearance, proceed to beacon NUN, You could mistake the M for the letter N, so therefore the air traffic controller will say, proceed to beacon Mike Uniform November.
The whole idea was to avoid misunderstandings while communicating and to standardize one alphabet for aviation.
The final choice of code words for the letters of the alphabet was made after hundreds of thousands comprehension tests involving many different nationalities to agree on 26 code words for the 26 letters in the alphabet, which are the least similar to each other when being pronounced.
Brilliant! And how do the numbers work?
Berlin departure, Boeing 1, 3,400 for flight level 50.
You're going to have some controllers who are going to be weaker in English than others. So when you are saying for flight level 50, they may be hearing flight level 450 or confusing the numbers.
Got it. So how on earth, or in the sky, do they not confuse numbers?
You just do 0, 1, 2, tree. So you're saying tree. 5 is actually pronounced fife, like the instrument, I think, fife.
Same goes for number 9. 9 sounds like the German word nein, which means no, and therefore is pronounced number 9 as niner.
But what I want to know is, what if a pilot breaks the language rules?
For example, you're a pilot from Argentina and you're flying from Argentina to Paris, and once you enter France airspace, you're going to both be speaking English, which is not your native language. In that scenario, you're going to be both hindered a little bit in what it is that you're trying to communicate. If you're speaking in proper ICAO phraseology, it's going to prevent, 1, the possibility of an accident, and 2, it's going to prevent possible delays that you could have because of miscommunication that's happening between the both of you.
This is probably the most dangerous of all these radio calls. Improper traffic sightings, like saying no joy when you don't have the traffic in sight. Controllers misunderstanding pilots when calling out traffic has been a contributing factor in several high-profile aviation accidents.
Pilot radio training is a huge part of flight school, but pilots are just like the rest of us, and there are some more colourful phrases that they use among each other, or even just ignore the standard words altogether.
Approaching Dakar, turning to heading 340 down to 6,000 feet. Clear through the average runway 10 for the approach to Port-au-Prince.
So why does this matter? Well, some airports can get very, very busy, very cramped airspace, and air traffic control, ATC, are hearing a lot of thick foreign accents. They don't have time to translate your slang.
And there literally have been a lot of crashes and accidents and a lot of loss of life in the past just because of misunderstandings and miscommunication in this industry. The best examples are Tenerife accident, the worst of all till now, wherein the pilots misunderstood or misinterpreted the takeoff clearance.
See, this is also why they introduced the English proficiency test years later. ICAO phraseology literally saves lives. Just thinking now of the Flying Tiger Flight 66, it was a flight that crashed in Malaysia in 1989 because the pilots misunderstood the instructions. Air traffic control radioed to the flight, Tiger 66, descend 2400. But the captain interpreted it as descend to 400, literally 2,000 feet too low. Anything can happen if you can't understand each other, and they now use this as an example of what not to do, just so that you are safe. As for the language testing, well, it's high stakes.
Channel 98, join right, Julia, join Alpha, hold short in November. Okay, I'll say it again. Hold short of Mike Alpha, M-A, Mike Alpha, not November.
Thank goodness all pilots have to do a certain test. The testing requirements entered the scene in 2008, and all around the world, the various centres that test English for aviation language proficiency have to be approved by national aviation authorities. There are tons of these tests. For example, this one, the LPAC. And just like any English test, these are certain things you have to get right. Each level is assessed with 6 criteria: pronunciation, structure, vocabulary, fluency, comprehension, and interactions. That last one, interactions, is really important.
It's going to be a one-on-one with your examiner. He might play you a tape which you have to listen to and later explain what the conversation was about, or he wants you to translate a text from your mother tongue into English or vice versa, and for sure he will engage you into a conversation about literally anything.
ANAC 123, clear to land on runway 29 left, wind 280 degrees, 14 knots, QNH 1014.
Clear to land on runway 29 left, wind 280 degrees, 14 knot, QNH 1014, ANAC 123.
They also include plain language in the tests because, believe it or not, plain language is an essential skill. Special phrases aren't enough for every conceivable situation. True in all walks of life. So how good must your English be? All pilots who fly internationally have to pass a level 4 in English proficiency. This is called operational level and it's the required minimum. And by the way, these are ICAO's own levels. If you're in the control tower, you're going to face some tough language situations. So you need level 4 to 5 speaking abilities at least. If you pass level 4, it's valid for 4 years. Level 5 is valid for 6 years. And level 6 is valid for life, which says a lot about how language skills deteriorate, right? So that's going to be your advanced English speaker, and you won't need to get retested because you understand English to a native-like level. If you're wondering how this compares to other English tests, it's a lot more focused on how you actually function in English, and so it's harder to pass. Plus, they grade you based on your lowest score. Safety in the skies is a really, really big deal, you see, and next time you're on an airplane, I'm sure you'll be very glad about this. As for passengers, well, they learn all sorts of different languages, and if you'd like to try one yourself, how about this one right here?